What's going on, everybody? Brett here, and I'm bringing you back for some more 1v1 Total War Warhammer 2 multiplayer action. Today I'm going to be playing as the Lizardmen against the Vampire Coast. So it seems like everyone I queue up against wants to play the Vampire Coast, and that's fine with me because I'm very interested in trying out builds that I believe might be very successful in disrupting the very heavy Vampire Coast themed meta that's developing right now. So that's exactly what my build is designed to do. So I'm going to put it in slow-mo so I can go over my overarching strategy, and we will check out the tools that I think are very effective at dealing with the Vampire Coast in general. So as a major part of my army, and something that I really wanted to experiment with, are the feral Carnosaurs. Let me pull up their unit cards here. Fear and Terror, not relevant in the Vampire Coast matchup, but they do have Frenzy, and these guys are very fast, 75 speed. You pair them with something like the feral Cold Ones, super cheap, only 450 gold, and you send them on the flanks. With their excellent speed, they're able to outmaneuver anything that the Vampire Coast does have access to. So we're going to flank here, and we have another matching pair on the other side that's going to go up and around. And then in this matchup, I think it's well known by now that the Chameleon Skinks are excellent against the Vampire Coast. Their innate missile resistance allows them to survive against the overwhelming gunpowder that the Vampire Coast can bring. But I think for most of these battles, the utility you get from the Skink skirmishers is pretty much equal to the Chameleon Skinks. For 200 gold less, you lose some stats kind of all the way down the board, but you do lose that physical, that missile resistance. But we'll see here why that's not always necessary. And when you bring 4 of these units, I mean, that's 800 gold, and that's going to be very important for my army as I am attempting to go wide and overwhelm the Vampire Coast forces. And I'll have you know that when I built this army, I was able to spend every last bit of gold without having to put any chevrons. So this army ended up being pretty perfect, I feel. For a skirmisher corps, this is the unit here that I think most people are worried about in almost every matchup, and they're the deck droppers with handguns. If your Vampire Coast opponent decides to go heavy with these guys, you can find yourself quickly being harassed to death by 130 ranged flying armor-piercing units that you don't have an answer for. So I have 2 groups of Skink skirmishers, which are an excellent answer with their poison. And I also have 2 matching pairs of Pterodon riders, the basic kind, and they beat them in melee, as well as having excellent missile damage with poison as well. And a Skink chief. So completely stripped down, just with the 350 gold mount of the Pterodon. They are excellent at focusing down Lord units. If he had gone like Noctilus on his Necrofex Colossus, they would be very good at focusing him down and just whittling him down through attrition over the course of a long fight. But they're also very good at keeping these Pterodon riders' morale high in the air, and they're going to have a lot of utility in the late game once they run out of ammunition. My infantry corps is made up entirely of Skink cohorts, so the very cheap basic Skinks. They're shielded, and the thing about Skinks is they get into the front line, they'll grind it out versus zombie pirates. They'll win, they'll lose, depending on the engagement, but they'll always return. Their leadership is such, and the leadership of the Lizardmen in general is such, that they'll rally, and you have to kind of play them almost like goblins. You have to continuously look for them throughout the course of a long battle and bring them back into favorable engagements and make use of them. So without any kind of caster in this roster, I felt like I needed some kind of healing. So for that, I brought the Bastillodon with the Revivification Crystal, and it warms my heart to see that these Skinks are actually attached to this guy and they're not floating in midair. So this is going to provide my healing and resurrection abilities, and I'm going to be using that throughout the course of the game, hoping to get as much value as possible from him. And the last part of this army that makes it all work is the Saurus Oldblood. So stripped down completely. His only job is to provide leadership and survive. So he's shielded, decent armor, decent combat stats, but with none of his items or abilities, he only costs 1100 gold, and that's what's going to allow me to go this wide this battle. And since my whole strategy is to go wide, that is quite valuable. So My opponent here, backline of carronades. So I recognize this early as the major threat. This is exactly what the feral Carnosaurs and cold ones are meant to stop, and their speed is such that these units are going to have to very slowly, if they want to try and take them down before they get into the background, they're going to have to very slowly adjust their fire, and that's going to allow for my Skink skirmishers to get into the front lines and start harassing the zombie pirate deckhand mobs with polearms. The one thing I have to say that I don't like about the vampire accounts is that their unit names are super annoying to say. If this was an Empire matchup, I would say swordsman, spearmen, but no, I have to say zombie pirate deckhands mob with polearms every time I want to reference a unit, so that's frustrating. So I'm going to look to shut down these carronades. They're protected by 2 units of scurvy dogs, which are not going to be anywhere near enough protection to deal with 2 feral Carnosaurs and some cold ones as kind of like a chaff chewing escort. So they're going to be very good at dealing with the scurvy dogs while the Carnosaurs are protected and do that heavy damage. So these are the kind of lifesavers for my opponent's army here. The fact that he went an entire front line of polearms is not lost on me. That's going to be very ineffective against my Skinks, who are actual anti-infantry units, these being anti-large and armor-piercing. But they're going to be very good against my large units, so we're going to want to break them off the battlefield as soon as we can. But the general best units that my opponent brought that are going to give him the most value this game are certainly the depth guard with polearms, superb anti-large armor-piercing units. Once they get into melee, their frenzy and their hunger really put them over the top. Their hunger allowing them to regen and sustain much longer than you might think they would be able to. So the Bloody Reaver Deck Guard, the Depth Guard Regiment of Renown, once again, a complete mouthful. These guys have a ward save that they can activate. I think it's something like every 2 minutes or so, and it gives them 44% damage resistance. And they're going to be very good at dealing with any of my large targets, as well as a standard unit of Depth Guard out here, out on the wings. And they will be excellent at dealing with my Skink cohorts. And these are, of course, the dual axe wielding variant, very good at chewing through infantry. And for his Lord and his sole leadership unit, it's going to be Count Noctilus here. So he does have Invocation of the Heck, as expected. He has all of his zombie summons as well as the Moon Dial, which gives him even more zombie summons. So you'll see my Pterodon Riders are already taking lots of cannon fire. But let's go ahead and speed this up. Pterodon Riders are moving in here. And at this point, I've realized with only 2 units of deck droppers with handguns that I would be able to bully them. So I'm going to seek to get my group over here and get into these guys in melee. The scurvy dogs are going to chase off my Skink skirmishers, but they're going to be able to kite them all day with their poison, and even if they catch them, 2 units of Skink skirmishers can do a good bit of damage in melee versus these scurvy dogs. So the feral Carnosaur, the feral cold ones are going to get in the back. We're going to instantly shut down 2 carronades, which is excellent, and the other group here of pterodons is going to be shooting at the other cannon there. So our front lines are mashing up. The Skinks should be doing just fine, and I was microing them as we engaged to make sure that we took optimal engagements. I want to make sure my little Skink buddies are fighting the polearm and not necessarily these depth guards. So I'm going to send my Bastillodon in to fight these depth guard. As a large target with heavy armor, they're going to have a good time against them. So we've shut down the cannons. My feral cold ones are rampaging, as well as my Carnosaurs. And we're going to be looking to use some of my cold-blooded there to bring some of them back into the fight, provide them leadership. And there we go. We finally tangle up these deck gunners, or deck droppers rather. And the Pterodon Riders are excellent in melee compared to the deck droppers. And they're going to be able to shut them down. The scurvy dogs here are crumbling. While they're engaged in melee with one of my Skinks, the others are going to be shooting them and bringing them down. I've managed to detach one of my Carnosaurs here that isn't rampaging. I gave him cold-blooded, and I'm going to bring him to the front line to help me deal with these depth guard. They're good at taking down large targets, but my opponent doesn't have any large targets, so I want to put them up against something that's not a depth guard with polearm, which are the exact units meant to kill them, and he has 2 of them here. And Count Noctilus is also an anti-large lord, so this Carnosaur is going to take a ton of damage. And I managed to keep him from rampaging, but he's going to be very difficult to detangle from this group. And an upgraded Invocation of the Hecht here, going to hit all of these units. We're killing both of these units of deck droppers. The scurvy dogs have been crumbled, and my skinks are now moving in to help me reinforce. Skinks have been broken off the field, but are now returning. And oh lord, here comes a Shadow Wraith, so that's going to do big damage to my Pterodon riders, who still have a good bit of ammunition. So seeing any of their unit models die is kind of sad. And we're going to take advantage of their missile damage here to start picking apart these unshielded polearm units. One of my Carnosaurs is broken off the battlefield. He's very injured. The Skink skirmishers can fire while moving in a 360 arc, so they're going to be very good at kiting any of these slow-moving zombie units. In the front line here, this Carnosaur was able to rack up quite a few kills against the depth guard as well as the zombie pirate deckhand mobs, and we're just trying to break them off everywhere we can. Every unit that crumbles is a bit more of an advantage for us, and we need to crumble them before Count Noctilus gets in here and provides more leadership to these units. So we're doing a bit of kiting here with these Skink skirmishers, and we are crumbling these deckhand mobs. Returning Skink cohorts are going to tie them down while we shoot them in the back. This unit over here is crumbling. But we have two units that have been summoned by Count Noctilus, and this is going to be the Vampire Coast saving grace this battle, is their ability to continuously summon more and more units. So even here, another unit. So 3 summoned units on the field for them. My Saurus Old Blood here is caught in the center of quite a few infantry, and he's having a hard time escaping. He doesn't have the mass on foot needed to break away from all of these units. One of my Carnosaurs is being hit with the Revivification Crystal, and that's going to give him some healing, allowing him to stay in the fight longer. And we're taking full advantage of our mobility here to attack whatever units we can. He's popped Enrage on these Bloody Reaver deck guard, which is protecting him from a lot of the physical damage being dealt by my skirmishing units. Now, one of the tactics you can do if you're playing my build, and it's something that I've mentioned before that I don't quite like to do, I can use my double Skink Chiefs to goon out Count Noctilus. Okay, so Count Noctilus has high armor, but he's not a shielded unit. He has the standard 15% missile resistance that all lords do. If I wanted to be a jerk, I could take both of my Skink Chiefs with their ridiculous amount of ammunition. They still have each about 40 shots left. And I could just park them over Count Noctilus and I could kill him. It would take a little while. He does have healing and regen. But that's a tactic that people have used against really any army since these units have been introduced. And it's not something I like to do. I think it's a bit cheesy. So what I'm going to focus on doing instead is I'm going to try and break all of these units, and I'm going to leave Count Noctilus for last. I've seen him summon a lot of units. I feel like he couldn't possibly have a lot of Winds of Magic left. You'll see there he's using his Arcane Conduit as we slow down and kind of look at him in the midst of his units. So he's trying to regenerate his Winds of Magic so he can perhaps do even more summoning or some sort of healing. The Bloody Reaver Death Guard, while a powerful unit, aren't optimal fighting against the Skinks. So let's go ahead and speed it up a little bit, zoom out so we can see the battlefield, because it's quite the hectic battle. You see here I have some returning Skinks. Most of the time I'm pretty quick on getting them back into the battlefield. If it takes me a second, it's because I'm really trying to get the perfect matchups on some of these battles. So my Saurus Old Blood comes back in here to try and support the Pharaoh Carnosaur, which is breaking off. My Bastillodon here is been thrown in against the Bloody Reaver Deck Guard. That's quite a bad engagement. I had tried to charge him in and then get him out, and I wasn't able to. Once he got stuck in, that was pretty much it. I thought my poison, which is debuffing all of these guys, would be enough to allow him to escape, because it does cause a slowing effect. And I thought they wouldn't be able to chase him down. So the Saurus Old Blood, I popped Cold-Blooded on him to try and give him some last-second leadership. And you'll see his leadership is quite high, but he's already broken. So he's going to be running. My skirmishers still have ammunition. There we go. Carnosaur gets in there for the charge and starts taking apart these depth guard. We need them to crumble. We need them gone. They're the anti-infantry variant, and the anti-infantry variant is going to be very good at dealing with my returning skink cohorts. So all my opponent has left is a full health Noctilus, a nearly dead Bloody Reaver depth guard, and a very high HP depth guard with polearms that's very near their healing cap. So my thought process is, at this point, I'm like, man, I've got to crumble these depth guard. I've got to take them out of the fight. I need as many of his units gone before I attempt to engage with Count Noctilus, who at this point has got to be very near his healing cap. And there they go, 200. Still 7 units left. I can't believe they're still not dead. I throw in the Saurus Old Blood to try and just very quickly break them. And they're nearly done. My Pterodon Riders have run out of ammunition, so they're going to be charging into the back of these depth guard. And whenever you hit a unit in the back, they're not going to cause fear to a unit like the depth guard, but they will ignore some of their defensive bonuses when you're attacking a unit in the back. So the Bloody Reavers are finally off the field. They're finally dead. So now all we have left to do is use the remainder of our ammunition to kite to death these depth guard with polearms. And if they want to fight my skink cohorts, that's fine with me. And meanwhile, all in the back, they're just getting shot to pieces. So, and they have no more healing. My Saurus Old Blood, I'm very confident that he's going to return to the battlefield. My Carnosaur, unfortunately, with 371 HP, that's not enough for him to want to get back into this fight. One of my skink chiefs is out of ammunition, and they're not pushovers in melee either. They have 310 weapon strength, not good armor, but enough weapon strength and combat stats to make a difference if it comes down to some sort of rough melee engagement. We just need to break these depth guard. They're at critical binding once they get to the point where they're crumbling, and there we go. So they're going to start taking damage on their own, and we just need to tie down Count Noctilus. Unfortunately, the skink skirmishers do not have poison and melee. So once they run out of their ammunition, we're not going to have a means of debuffing Count Noctilus with poison. I want to say the chameleon skinks, that's one of their benefits, is that they do possess poison melee attacks, which can be quite valuable if they find themselves caught out against a unit like these scurvy dogs. So I'm going to hold my Saurus Old Blood here, enough away from the battle that he is not in danger of suffering from too many of these negative penalties that you can sustain in the late game when you have these types of melee grinds where units are routing and coming back. Unfortunately, my Bastiladon routed and just never came back. He broke with 500 HP with a couple of his heals still left and some ammunition left on him as well, some poisonous ammunition, but he just never came back with 500 HP, which was sad because I kind of expected him to. I was waiting for him to rally at the last moment. My last skink chief here has run out of ammunition, and I felt like it was time to just swarm Count Noctilus. And we'll see here, his leadership is dropping. We can go ahead and put it in slow-mo. And we'll see his leadership is dropping, 28. We need to get him much lower than that in order to break him. He's using Arcane Conduit to give himself even more Winds of Magic. I'm still keeping the Saurus Old Blood off to the back. I've given him Cold-Blooded just to increase his leadership to make sure that he doesn't rout. Because if he routs, surprisingly, the skink chiefs, despite the fact that they have encouragement auras, they don't weigh as much on the balance of power as having a Saurus Old Blood. So my idea at this point was to bring in my Saurus Old Blood up and around these summons. And I was pretty frustrated that he had another summons this battle. Pterodon Riders are broken with only one model left. That's understandable. They did a lot of work for me this game. But I wanted to bring my Saurus Old Blood up and around the back and try and get into the rear of these zombie pirate deckhand mobs. I don't want to fight anywhere near Count Noctilus. He's right in the middle. He's being swarmed. But unfortunately, and this is what I think ended up happening, yeah, we break and we lose. So let's go ahead and look at the unit breakdown. And I'm going to tell you what I think happened, just based on my experience with this game. I think we had enough there to kill Noctilus. We had 2 skink chiefs. Unfortunately, they are large targets versus Count Noctilus, so he would have done quite well against them. But there was enough chaff units in there, just tying him up in melee, that I think we could have eventually overwhelmed him. But what I think happened was the Saurus Old Blood needed to stay off to the side for the remainder of the fight. him getting into melee and starting to suffer some of those nearby routing unit penalty, there's lots of different penalties that once a unit is very damaged that they start to sustain. You'll get something like attacked in the flank, attacked in the rear, bigger and stronger enemies nearby, damaged, heavily damaged. All of these things affect your morale, and without bringing him into melee, I think we could have worn down those units enough to kill Count Noctilus. But you'll see here these huge kills on the depth guard, and even the polearm variant of the deckhands mobs. He ended up getting a lot of value from his secondary line. We managed to shut down the carronades early. I think that was kind of the saving grace of this build, and exactly what this build was meant to do. I mean, these two Carnosaurs with the Feral Cold Ones, I mean, that was their one job. And the Pterodon Riders with the two Skink Chiefs, taking out these deck droppers, that was their job. And the Skink cohorts were just there to tie down the infantry, which they did beautifully. And you'll see here we lost, but a lot of our units left the field with quite a bit of HP. And our Skink Chiefs in particular, I mean, they fired all of their ammunition, but there was just so much regen and so many summons. I would say Count Noctilus probably summoned somewhere like 7 units this game, which is pretty overwhelming to deal with. A little bit better micro there for me, and perhaps we could have taken that. So the reason I wanted to bring this build to you guys' attention is because I felt like it's quite a strong build at dealing with a lot of different variations of the Vampire Coast matchup. So let's say he brought one less carronade, just a ton more of these cheaper polearms, maybe cut these 2 very expensive ones, went with even more handgun deck droppers and a Necrofex Colossus, for example, just a slight variation of the same build. These tools would all still be relevant. The Carnosaurs would be excellent at taking down the Necrofex Colossi. The Pterodon Riders, I would be able to split them up with the Skink Chiefs and go, 1 for 1 with these deck droppers. And I would still have the fast-moving Feral Cold Ones to get in amongst the carronades. So the tools would still be there. And I think this is a very good utility build for any sort of Vampire Coast matchup. Not having a caster certainly hurts. I would say the one build where this might be somewhat weak is against the Silastra Direfin matchup. If she is on foot and she is ethereal, you don't have very many ways of taking down an ethereal lord with this matchup. So I would say, something like 75% of the time, this is going to be a solid build versus the Vampire Coast. And like I mentioned, I think if I had been a little more careful with my Revivification Crystal, maybe kept it closer to my Saurus Old Blood, I would have been able to gotten off those last maybe 3 or so heals, and that could have been big at bringing my Saurus Old Blood back up to, let's say, half HP and stabilizing. It's also, I believe I used them, it was hard to kind of show you during the midst of the battle, but I think I used them a lot on the Feral Carnosaur, which is good for pure healing, but if you use it on an infantry unit, you have a chance to resurrect unit models in the same way that Invocation of Nahek does. So alright guys, I want to say thank you to my opponent, Do Diddly Boop, for the excellent game and the good sportsmanship. If you guys enjoyed this battle, hit the like button. If you like my channel, please subscribe. I'll be doing more of these almost daily, as you've probably noticed if you're already watching my channel. So without any further ado guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.